Is Texas Tech faltering? Is Houston still in the S tier? Is BYU deserving of being in the A tier? We have so many questions. So let's get into our Big 12 tier rankings for this week. We're going to go ahead and start with Utah this week. Get it out the way early.
Yeah, that's an easy one to start. D tier. Welcome to the D tier, Utah.
Wow.
You're staying home.
Moving on to Texas Tech. Where are we going to place them this week?
I think Texas Tech is still an A tier team. I mean, I think last week we were debating between whether or not they were S tier, and then they lose a game at home, albeit, but to a team that has potentially the number one pick in the entire world on their team, who just went full takeover mode. I'm not going to dock them too many points to that, especially with Christian Anderson out. I think Texas Tech is absolutely still an A tier team.
I agree with you, Damon. I think Texas Tech is still in that A tier, albeit maybe slipping a little bit from the very front of it. I think that this team is still a team that can compete in the Big 12 conference and on any night could beat anybody. You have JT Toppin. On most nights, you have Christian Anderson. We've seen what Lawan Watts is developing into. Atwell can really snipe it as well. So, yeah, I think Texas Tech is still an A tier team in the Big 12 as of right now, Damon. Moving on to Colorado. We got the Colorado Buffaloes, and Tad, what's that on his face? It's a boil. They're still coming in the D tier for me, Damon. Do you disagree?
No, I don't. I mean, they're 3-6 overall. It's hard to really, be too pumped up about what Colorado has going on, especially when they took 6 L's in a row prior to their last win, albeit their last win was a decent one. Outside of that Iowa State loss, most of those losses are fairly respectable, right? I mean, Cincinnati is not a good basketball team, so it's not like they're straight up horrible. Then they beat TCU by 26, and that's a solid win for Colorado, in my opinion. So I think they're at the top of the D tier, Kevin, but they are a D tier opponent.
Moving on, we got BYU. BYU is an interesting case, in my opinion. We were talking about this yesterday on the show. They have not played the best level of talent on the other side, and when they have, they've kind of taken some losses. But I still think that this is an A-tier team, despite losing to Arizona and still coming back in that game, despite Tony Padilla's best efforts. This is an A-tier team still, right?
BYU's beaten absolutely nobody.
They haven't.
They've lost to Kansas. They've lost to Arizona. They lost to Texas Tech. They beat Clemson. They beat Miami. They beat Wisconsin, and they lost to UConn. And they beat Villanova. So their good wins right now are like Clemson, Villanova, and Wisconsin, essentially, are like their top 3 wins that they have. All of those being, of course, in the non-conference. None of them being in Big 12 play. It would be like as if Arizona had that fast start against all those bad teams, and then immediately when they started playing the good teams, they just lost all of those games. That's what BYU is essentially doing. Kevin, honestly, I'll say it. I think, could we put them in the B tier?
Whoa. Wow. BYU B tier? I mean, honestly,
the BYU tier.
The BYB tier. I could get behind this. I think mostly because we've had such a bare B tier that I think we should really start utilizing it more as like you got to earn the A tier. You really do.
I agree.
The same way we've been making
What
it
have they
clear.
earned? What have they earned? They've earned a win against an ACC team that's mid as hell. They've earned a win against Wisconsin. That's cool. Number 23 Wisconsin. And they earned a win on a neutral floor against a Villanova squad that might make the tournament. Congratulations, BYU. You're in the B tier.
BYU in the B tier is not something I thought I'd be looking at today when I woke up this morning, but I think we're right. Like, I think if we're actually going to be utilizing these tiers the way we initially set out to do so, where the S tier is true title contenders, the A tier is true conference title contenders, and then maybe the B tier is just some really good teams, and then everything else after that is to different varying degrees of bad.
Yeah, we mentioned it. We wanted to get BYU in the B tier to give this team some company. It's UCF time, and that means we're back in the B tier here. UCF, solid team, tournament team. Kevin, I think that's fair to say at this point, right? UCF is a bona fide NCAA tournament team. They have about as good of a resume as you could possibly have in this conference with the expectations that they had going into the year. They just came off a win against Texas Tech at home in the space game, which you never want to play them in the space game.
They are a good team. I like UCF. I think UCF deserves to be ranked, as Sam Albert says in the chat. I think UCF is a ranked quality basketball team. But West Virginia, where are we doing with the Mountaineers? I feel like this is still the best team in the C tier. Do you agree?
I do agree with that. They're 5-4 in the conference. They still hoist a winning record in the conference. They're coming off a loss against Baylor.
Not ideal.
Not good.
Not ideal.
Not good. Baylor has had probably about as disastrous of a start as they could have possibly imagined, and they're probably not as bad as what they had shown at that point in the season, but that's still not a good loss to sustain, especially when you're at home, especially when it's by 10 points.
Damon, moving on, we got Oklahoma State, Arizona's next opponent coming up. What are we going to do with Steve Lutz's group? I think that this is still a C-tier team. I think that they are the second best team in the C-tier, and I think they should be one behind West Virginia. Do you agree?
They beat Utah. They handled business against Utah. That's what you got to do. They were actually, that game, I told you, Kevin, when we were doing our Saturday show, I was like, have you seen this Utah-Oklahoma State line? Because it was an even spread. It was a pick'em.
Yeah.
And I was like, Utah is horrific. How is Oklahoma State, who's pretty good, going to be in an even spread game, albeit, it was in Salt Lake, and that's a high elevation place to play. That didn't make any sense to me. They end up getting the job done by 12. I think Oklahoma State's okay. C for Cowboys.
It's interesting, right? Because they lose to TCU on the 20th of January, and I still feel like I would take Oklahoma State in like a neutral site game against TCU, but I could be wrong. Because the thing that TCU has up on Oklahoma State is that TCU is the 27th most efficient defense in the country, but they can't put the ball into the basket. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State is the 62nd best offense in the country and the 84th best defense in the country. So they're a little bit more balanced, but not really elite at anything the way TCU is really good at defense. Do you think that TCU should be behind or ahead of Oklahoma State in the C tier? Let's just get TCU out the way now.
I think behind because they've just been so inconsistent. TCU has some bad losses, man. They really do. You're sitting there and you're like, what are you guys doing? How are you losing to Colorado by 26? How are you losing to Utah, And
honestly, if you look at Oklahoma State's schedule, I feel like they're better than TCU, mostly because TCU is like their worst loss on the season. TCU is their worst loss. And outside of that, it's Oklahoma, which is comparable to TCU in terms of the loss, Texas Tech, Iowa State twice, and I guess Baylor is actually probably their worst loss.
Yeah.
Baylor is definitely their worst loss.
Moving on here.
Next up, Iowa State. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about Iowa State, specifically in this very chat, about whether or not they deserve to be in that S tier. That's kind of been the conversation that went on yesterday. People wanted Iowa State and their elite level defense and their balanced roster and their 3 potential All-Americans to get in that conversation. I think that Iowa State, they really should have one loss, and it really should just be to Kansas at this point. But I think that this is still an A-tier team, and I would put them ahead of Texas Tech at this period in time. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think they belong ahead of Texas Tech solely because Texas Tech has these last 2 losses, albeit to UCF and Kansas. So, I don't think that it's debilitating. I don't think that makes me feel worse about Texas Tech really as a team. I think they're still such a tough out. But, yeah, I think Iowa State, just given body of work at this point in the season, even though I think we've long been like on the train of I think Texas Tech is better than Iowa State. I think we're more impressed with Texas Tech than Iowa State. I think Iowa State just belongs ahead of them. You can't really argue otherwise.
Yeah, and I think Iowa State is in that conversation we were having about Texas Tech before they lost the game to Kansas about being as close to an S-tier team as you could be without being in the S-tier. Iowa State is quickly getting back into that kind of conversation after their back-to-back losses. Moving on, though, we got Cincinnati, Damon Dog, and not too much deliberation on this. Despite their defense, despite Baba Miller, this is the D-tier team. Right?
Yeah, they're like TCU, but like a worse version, where like you just never know what you're getting out of Cincinnati. They could beat Iowa State, they could lose to ASU, they could play a game against Houston, then they could go lose to Houston by 21 in their next time that they play them. They just can't score the basketball. I have no respect for what they got going on. Really, they're like the type of team that like they're good enough where they could catch you because they play like such a high level of defense, but they're just not going to really make any noise and not have a good season when it's all said and done. So yeah, I think they're a D-tier team for sure. Cincinnati sucks.
You know who else stinks?
ASU.
Arizona State. Read my mind, Damon. This is another D-tier team. We do not have to deliberate too much on it. Get your ass in the D-tier. Moving on. We got Arizona. And this is another S-tier team. They've been an S-tier team the whole year. They're going to continue to be an S-tier team. Now, this is where it gets interesting, though, Damon, because Arizona does come in the S-tier with Houston, but There are currently 6 ranked Big 12 teams in the top 25 of the AP. Arizona has 6 games against the other 5 ranked teams in that list. Is there a world where at the end of February, we are no longer looking at an S-tier Arizona?
I don't think so. But there is a world. I think that if you're saying if there's a possibility, yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, you play the hardest gauntlet of maybe any team in the country. And at the same time, while I'm saying that, like, I think that the first 6 or 7 games going into this year, it was a good ramp up into this Big 12 season and gives us a leg advantage of being like, okay, we're probably it's going to be ours to lose. Like, destiny is in the Arizona Wildcats' hands, which feels good when you're a fan, right? You don't want it to be, you need other teams to lose in order for your team to be able to get a championship. That being said, that does make it for where there's a stretch where you're just playing elite team after elite team, and you cannot let that snowball on you. You have to at least play 500 basketball at the absolute minimum, I would say, in those games, the 6 games that you're referring to in particular. So it's definitely, like, there's a world. I just don't think that we're living in it, Kevin. I think that Arizona, like, even with, the gauntlet, I would be shocked if they don't have a winning record when it's all said and done out of this thing.
I agree with you. Like, I think that Arizona will still be an S-tier team. Kansas is next on our list, Damon. We do have potentially a new spot for the Jayhawks after their big, massive road win over Texas Tech. And overall, their level of play recently has been practically lights out, honestly. You have one of the better defenses in the country. You have one of the better players in the country for Kansas. I think this is the top team on the A tier. Do you disagree?
I think Kansas is back, Kevin. I think I'm ready to officially say it. Kansas is back. The Big 12 was obviously Kansas's conference forever. That's not a news to anybody. They Bill Self has 20 conference championships or something stupid like that. And that's in a conference that had respectable and high-level basketball opponents. It's not like it was just Kansas and bums. You're looking at Kansas now. They're 12th in KenPom right now, Kevin. They are 8th in defensive rating. They're really damn good. I think Kansas is absolutely a team to be reckoned with, and I think Arizona splits with them.
Next up, we got Baylor. This is another D-tier team, in my opinion, Damon. Baylor, despite that W we discussed earlier, I just don't believe in Scott Drew's group to get it done. And now, if I could admit some bias here, Damon, I think that Baylor could go undefeated the rest of the year, and I might drop them in these rankings. You got James Najee on the squad. You went to the old man home and went and got an old man to come play with the kids. I don't respect that, Scott Drew. I had a lot of respect for you coming into this year. Out the window. You're a D-tier program right now. That's just the way it is. Do you disagree?
I think we might need to make another tier below has a G League player on their team. Baylor sucks. Yeah, Put him in the D tier.
Moving on to our last team, and quite frankly, certainly least team on the tier rankings is K-State and Jerome Tang. Welcome to the bottom of our tier list. They stink, and they will continue to stink like a Wildcat that has not had a bath.
They're horrible. Jerome Tang sucks. Kansas State is a nightmare. PJ Haggerty, I'm sure he's sitting there. He cannot believe that that's the program that he invested his time in his last college basketball season into.
And then the check cashes, and he's right back in. Back in.
That's fair. But yeah, they're a disaster. There's honestly, like, when you look at this, there's a lot more bad Big 12 teams than maybe we probably would have anticipated going into this year. But yeah, I think that I thought there would be a little bit more of a middling pack here, but it's just mostly bottom tier.
I agree with you, Damon. And Jervis says in the chat, here's the thing. You guys have so many teams in the D tier. Do you still consider the Big 12 the best conference? And my answer is yes. Because I think when we're doing this tier ranking, it's all relative, right? Like, it's all relative to other Big 12 schools. We're not grading ASU compared to the Big Sky, right? Because they might actually contend in the Big Sky Conference or the Summit League or whatnot, but it's all relative to the Big 12, right? So, for example, what's Cincinnati, right? In the ACC, probably middling, with even regardless of how poorly they can score the ball. But I think some of these lesser Big 12 teams are still middle table, top half of the table in some of these lesser power conferences, in my opinion. That's why I still think the Big 12 is the best, because we don't have an F tier for a reason. There really are no garbage programs in the Big 12. Even K-State, who truly stinks, has like PJ Haggerty on it, right? They have like a talented player who they're paying a lot of money to come play for them. So I think the Big 12 is still the best conference, especially when you consider the top end is so incredibly good. But I'm open to hearing, like, you know, if you think that the SEC or the Big 10 or whatever has like a better bottom end, we can talk about like Georgia Tech versus like some of these other teams in the Big 12. We can talk about like some of the lesser teams in the ACC and the SEC versus the lesser teams in the Big 12. Because without having looked at it too in depth, I think I'm probably going to end up taking some of these Big 12 schools over some of those lesser schools from the ACC and the Big 10 and the SEC.